The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello people of Norfolk, it's a while since I graced your county, isn't it? But I'm back and I'm beginning a brand new district. This is North Norfolk, and all this week we'll be exploring some of the fantastic coastline you can find in this bit of the county. Now, speaking of that coastline, there's plenty of cliffs around here, and the sea has done a fair bit of damage to those over the years. In fact, this lane you can see behind me used to lead to a church, but that church has long since been lost to the sea. This is Sidestrand. Sidestrand, Broadshore. This week on TVI we're making our first foray into the wonderful world of North Norfolk. There's 122 parishes in this one, and a lot of them line the coast. It includes some fabulous coastal resorts like Cromer and Sheringham, but there's more than a few great little villages out here as well. Here's a corker to begin with. It might only be small, but Sidestrand has a really interesting backstory to it. Located just over 3 miles away from Cromer, Sidestrand is located on an ever-shrinking cliff top. Within the past 100 years, coastal erosion has significantly chipped away at that cliff. It used to have a church dedicated to St Michael, but it had to be demolished and rebuilt further inland, as it was threatened by the sea, leaving only the old tower behind. The decision to abandon it was a shrewd one, because the tower was eventually lost to the waves in 1916. The name Sidestrand sounds Scandinavian, doesn't it? Well, it actually is. It's thought to derive from the Old English word sid, meaning broad or spacious, and the Danish word strand, which means shore. Clearly the Danes wasted no time here when they invaded Britain. Some of the Victorians knew the area by another name, Poppyland. It was immortalised as such in the writings of Clement Scott, a poet and a playwright who was an influential theatre critic for the Daily Telegraph. Let's have a look at it then and see what Poppyland looks like today. Here we have Sidestrand as it looked in 1900. As you can see, it sits on the coast, but this is no coastal resort. It's perched on a cliff top with some great views of the sea, but the area is rugged and wild. That's due to the process of rapid coastal erosion on this part of the British coastline. Sidestrand's beaches and dramatic cliffs are less accessible than most others. The cliffs are 50 metres high. People do still explore them though, because they contain glacial sediments and structures. Its beach is popular with petrologists and fossil hunters. Sidestrand was a very different place at this time. By zooming in, you can see why. The coast is now a lot closer to the village as the sea has chipped away at the shrinking cliff. So much so that one landmark the Victorians knew simply doesn't exist anymore, the old St Michael's Church. However, a new one had just been built when this map was produced, and it still stands here today, further inland. It's next to Sidestrand Hall, which is also still very much here, although it has an educational use these days. There are two other things shown on this map which are different today. One is this windmill, which is no longer there, and the other is the reading room to the south. That still stands, but it's not a reading room anymore. Given all of that, here's what Sidestrand looks like now, and you can tell straight away it's far closer to the sea. In another 100 years, this could well be a lost village, so it's important to put this on the map properly here. So, how are we going to do that? Well, here's our route. There won't be a lot of walking here. We'll start on Tower Lane, where we'll talk a bit about coastal erosion before taking a drive down Cromer Road to the present church. Whilst there, we'll discuss what's become of Sidestrand Hall these days. To finish with, we'll carry on down the road in the car until we reach the old reading room. It'll be a fleeting stop there before we head down the road to Trimmingham to leave Sidestrand behind. So it's not a complicated one by any means, but it will be a bit awkward in places. We start on Tower Lane in the north of the parish. This is a dead end as it comes to an abrupt stop at the cliff which Sidestrand sits on. Over the past few centuries, the cliff has continually worked its way closer and closer to the village thanks to coastal erosion. In the 1870s, you would have come down this road to get to the local church dedicated to St Michael, but you can't do that anymore. As the cliff continued to disappear, so did the locals' hope of the church surviving into the 20th century. It was therefore demolished and rebuilt elsewhere. Tower Lane gets its name thanks to what was left behind. Only the tower of the old church and the graveyard remained in 1881 after the rest of the church had been removed. It would take 35 years, but the tower would eventually succumb to the sea, falling off the cliff in 1916. Tower Lane used to be important for the local Coast Guard. About halfway down the remains of it is a holiday let called Rocket Cottage. On the old map we saw earlier, this was marked. It was, though, referred to there instead as the Gun House. They are one and the same thing. A gun house was also known as a rocket house or a rocket station. It was a building used to store and deploy life-saving rocket apparatus to rescue people from shipwrecks. The gun was often a man-B mortar or a rocket pistol, which fired a line to a stranded ship. Let's drive on now, and while we're in the car, we'll discuss what happened to the windmill. It stood in what is now just a field opposite Tower Lane. It was known as Jermy Smock Mill, or sometimes the Black Mill, as its tower was tarred. It stood on the site of an earlier mill that burnt down in 1836. That mill was preceded by an even earlier one. That, though, was a post mill. The mill site was actually in the parish of Northreps. So for centuries, a mill of some sort stood on the coast here. It was always useful for ships, being a really good sea mark. It had 4 double-shuttered sails which powered 2 pairs of stones. Its Norfolk boat-shaped cap had a gallery and held an 8-bladed fan. Each blade was painted red with blue and white bands. It was blown over in a gale in 1921 and never rebuilt. The church was, though. Let's see that next. So the awkward part of this episode was finding somewhere to park the car to go and see this church, because this is the road that the church stands on, and as you can see, there's absolutely nowhere to park. So I just had to use my brain a little bit and park out of the way so that there's no obstruction. Okay, so there is the church, which we will go and have a look at, and behind that is Sidestrand Hall, which these days is no longer a residence. It used to be. It's a school these days. So this is the current church of St Michael, built in 1881 at the expense of the MP Sir Samuel Hoare, who lived at Sidestrand Hall. A lot of this is reused material, which came from the old church on the cliff top. It's apparently more or less the same, design-wise. Having said that, the tower of the new church is topped by a tall octagonal stage. The old tower was round all the way from top to bottom. This one is built in a traditional 13th century East Anglian fashion. You would do well to guess, if you didn't already know, that this is a 19th century church. I'd imagine the old church was a fairly peaceful place. This one is sited next to a busy road, although the narrow sleeve-like churchyard here still feels like an oasis. There's not a great deal of parking here. I had to be a little creative myself. So what does this one have to its name then? Well, in a niche in the porch is what appears to be a medieval angel holding a chalice, probably once a pinnacle on a tower or wall at the old church. The font is set in a kind of baptistry beneath the tower, whilst the floor is an elaborate greeny blue mosaic, perhaps intended to represent water. This church must have been very high in the Anglo-Catholic firmament in its day, and there are still echoes of this. Nicholas Pevsner said in his work that the War Memorial is by Seeley and Paget, reusing a Renaissance image niche. All of the windows here are by the great Henry Holiday. The east window depicts a very manly Christ walking on water, and that's appropriate given that this church stands as a memory of its predecessor, lost to the Great Sea. This church does still have the sense of the special place that the writer Clement Scott discovered when he was here. Clement Scott was a Victorian journalist who in the late 19th century described this area of Norfolk in an article in the Daily Telegraph as Poppyland, a lovely sounding name. Scott retains his place in Norfolk's collective imagination for the part he played in popularising the northeast Norfolk coast. It was as Poppyland that this area promoted itself to holidaymakers, most famously on a Great Eastern Railway poster. The railway had a vested interest in Scott's work actually, because they were the ones that had paid for Scott to visit Sidestrand in the first place. Scott, who was a Catholic convert, first dreamed up the name Poppyland whilst lying in the poppy-filled churchyard of St Michael's, which he described as the Garden of Sleep. But any Scott enthusiasts coming to repeat their hero's experience would be making a mistake. You see, Scott was lying in the old churchyard, the final pieces of which were lost over the edge of the cliff in 1935, almost 2 decades after the tower suffered the same fate. The Victorian replacement had no poppies in it when we were here, but I guess they could grow in it. Now, even though the church is open daily, it's about 7 o'clock in the morning at the moment and it's not open yet. So even though it would be nice to go in and see all of that stuff I've just been talking about, at the moment I can't do that, and I'm kind of on a bit of a time schedule here, so I don't really have time to come back later. Anyway, we have a couple of other things to see before we leave Sidestrand behind, and here on the wall of the church is something we can see that's related to Sidestrand Hall. You can see we have a tablet here which tells us about the graves of a few people, and top of the list up there is Samuel Hoare, Baronet, 1841 to 1915, of Sidestrand Hall. He used to live literally next door to this church. Let's go and see where his house was. Let's have a look at Sidestrand Hall now. This is next to the church and was once a family home. It was owned by the Flaxman and the Spurrell families before being sold in 1880 to Samuel Hoare, who later became MP for Norwich and funded the church's reconstruction. A lot has changed since the days of Samuel Hoare. It was once a Methodist holiday home, but now Sidestrand Hall is a school. Since 1950, this has been helping children with special needs. It caters for boys and girls aged 8 to 16 with moderate learning difficulties. Currently, the school has 110 pupils, around 20 of whom are part-time boarders who stay at the school during the week. In the early years, there were around 150 pupils, all of whom were year-round boarders who would sleep in dormitories. In those days, children came here to be cared for rather than to learn. Now they gain qualifications and work for their GCSEs. All of its pupils go on to further education colleges. In the past, the school was seen as something separate, but now it's become very much a part of the community here. There are some quirky features to the place these days. For example, where the croquet lawn once stood, there's now a go-kart track. The school used to keep chickens and pigs at one time, but now pupils are able to enjoy woodland walks and activities rather than keeping livestock. So obviously a lot of greenery, a lot of trees and things. You can't really see Sidestrand Hall from literally outside the front entrance, but it is there, and that is where Samuel Hoare once lived, the guy who funded the reconstruction of St Michael's Church. Now the sun's coming up and it looks fantastic. It's going to be a nice day today, and that means the next village is going to look cracking. So we're going to be heading this way to the next village, but to get there, I've got to drive. One last thing to see here, and it's the reading room. There's not much to tell you about this other than the fact it's now a private house. There's a more historic reading room at Overstrand, closer to Cromer. That was funded by Lady Battersea and also housed a tennis court and a cricket ground at one time. Alright, we've reached the end of the first episode in North Norfolk. Only 121 to go. That's easy, I'll have them done in a week. If only. I won't, but I will have 4 more done by Friday. Tomorrow, we're off to a place where you could once find a big golf ball overlooking the sea. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.